Good evening, everyone. Episode 8 of Kerr's Rage, Part 1 of the Duaredheim Staff Saga, by me. Okay, we start out with the chapter entitled Dragonia on page 83. And the book can be purchased from Stratton Press, as well as Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. In addition, all the other books are available except for The Ice Moon, which is the finale, the conclusion. It will be released quite soon. It's in the editing stages. Okay. Dragonia. Dragonia's war with Firmenor began 100 years prior to the joining of the Five Kingdoms. Firmenor's provinces consisted of Safe Haven, Etzel, Drakmar, Eleanor, and Linnea. Theirs was an unheard-of alliance between historical enemies, formed in the hopes that their combined strengths would be enough to fend off their Dragonian invaders. But Dragonia was an empire that had spent half a millennium perfecting the arts of war, alliance, and acquisition. Their people were rich in tradition, fierce in battle, and dedicated to their cause. They made intelligent allies as they spread their influence ever wider. For 500 years they had found no equal in military strategy, and never had they known defeat. That is, until the Five Kingdoms of Firmenor had united. But great warriors are forged from powerful enemies, and Firmenor's new challenge only fueled Dragonia's desire for victory. Dragonia was a united continent with varied peoples, but it was ruled by the Dark Elfar, they who had come out of darkness to rule both the day and the night. It was said that their black sorcery was as deadly as any blade, and their vengeance as devastating as the storm. But what was war to a young sorcerer's apprentice or a newly bearded dwarf? To the young, war is something played out, each a great hero in his own imagination. If only that were true when those children became soldiers. Antinius Molinar, Chronicler of History. One-Eyed Jacks. And really, this is where the story of Kerr's Rage begins. Not where the book begins. That's an introduction, character introduction. This is pretty much where Kerr's Rage really begins. One-Eyed Jacks. Pausing for a moment to drink from my flagon, I saw that my audience was anxiously awaiting the rest of my story. I couldn't disappoint them. They all pulled their stools a little closer to mine, and I could only hope that it was to better hear my words. Even Sonia seemed interested, despite the fact that she'd heard my tale a time or two before. "How do you know so much about Vlad?" Eric asked. "He told me himself, when I was his captive in the Orcs' Pyramid Fortress, Drakon Muir-Falor." "You were his prisoner?" Polly asked. "How did you escape?" Garrett continued. "Hold on now," I said. "That's an entire story in itself. But if you all please bear with me, I'll make you all understand. To tell a story well, you must have a beginning, middle, and an end. And if I begin with our tale of capture, we'll be lost somewhere in the middle. Let me get back to the introduction of my friends and how we all came together. Now, if you'll kindly refill my flagon, I'll tell you of how our adventures began." About 125 years ago, the full moon of Sanguis. "More ale, One-Eye," shouted a young mountain dwarf, waving his empty flask vaguely in the direction of the bar. "And not that damn whale vomit Baracus makes. Why, if my father were here to see how you humans brew ale, his whiskers would stand on end." "Shut up and drink, Keg," Kalor said. "The war can't reach us here." "Ah," Kerr replied with a grunt. Draining his flagon, he swatted at Sonia to bring him another. Her exaggerated curtsy and sway of her hips was almost enough to make him wish that he were human. Dwarven women were so hairy, after all. The disgusted look that Carmen gave him brought such a peculiar, half-drunk look of self-consciousness to his face that Kalo broke out into another burst of uncontrollable laughter. Carmen, unusual enough in her status as a warrior, was even more complicated in her divine sense of virtue. Not surprisingly, taverners like One Eyes were not where she felt the most comfortable. Not one to indulge, her cup of tea left her feeling even more out of place. Praying that the night would end quickly, she amused herself by watching Darton and Leander engaging in an arm wrestling match. She'd known them for 5 years, and she was certain that their arm wrestling had been ongoing since long before that. Their foreheads were beaded with sweat, and because they were nearly of equal strength, their contests could go either way. Unfortunately, their duels often ended in well-acted mock brawls, which often brought in other tavern-goers as well. Such fights had forced One Eye to ban them from the tavern on several occasions. But his memory of such things seemed to be short, and she couldn't remember him ever carrying out his threat of banishment. For a moment, it looked as if tonight's match would go to Leander. His loose-fitting tan shirt was stained with the sweat of exertion, and his fair hair was plastered about his face. His moment of victory never came, however, for their struggle was suddenly interrupted by a lone traveler's rough entrance through the tavern's saloon-style doors. Clutching his side tightly, the stranger's right hand and cloak were stained with blood. Badly wounded, he staggered towards the bar. "Some wine, barkeep," he stammered. "What's ailing you, stranger?" he asked, his single eye glaring as he poured him a large glass of pale wine. "Ran into some trouble on the North Road, but bandits, I think. There's always trouble come harvest time. Natasha," he bellowed into the small kitchen behind the bar, "bring bandages and hot water, quickly." "Please don't concern yourself with me," the stranger said painfully as he half sat, half collapsed onto a vacant bar stool. "Nonsense," One Eye said. "We can take care of our own here. Natasha, hurry." Draining his glass in one swift gulp, the stranger staggered. A moment later, he was falling off his stool and into the arms of a nearby dwarf. "Carmen," Kerr said. "Natasha, help me bring him upstairs." The veins in his temples were bulging from the strain of breaking the man's fall. Nevertheless, his short, massive arms were every bit the equal to the task. He led them up the back stairs with the injured man. Placing him in an empty room, they laid him upon a tavern bed. Leander and Dartin were close behind them, bearing blankets and clean bandages. "Who is he?" Dartin inquired. "Not sure yet," Kerr replied. Natasha quickly undid the belt holding the man's black cloak about him, carefully opening it to reveal the true nature of his wounds. "Gods have mercy," she gasped. Blood was slowly ebbing from around the broken shaft of some bolt or arrow. Almost as surprisingly was the nature of his clothes. His belt held numerous small pouches smelling of herbs and other things, and his garb consisted of the robes of a wizard of the blue cloth. Such magicians, it was said, were sages of great knowledge. It was also said that they commanded great power. Few people ever ventured close enough to find out. If he's really a wizard, then he's just a pup. He bleeds pretty good, though. Please, Keg, the man's half dead, and you've got to make jokes. Sorry, he answered, embarrassed. Dartin and Natasha examined the wound carefully. Seeing the skin and muscle protruding unnaturally just above his left kidney, they concluded that the bolt would have to come out as soon as possible. "We'll have to push it out the back," Dartin said. "I hope he doesn't wake up." Natasha held the man steady while Dartin grasped the broken shaft. Pushing hard, he drove the arrowhead out through his back. With great care, he pulled the bolt out, applying strong pressure over both the entry and exit wounds. Light red blood dripped through his fingers, and that was a good sign. Dark red blood, and the man would have soon been dead. Laying the man on his side, they thoroughly cleaned his wounds, stitching them closed with a well-fashioned bone needle and fine silk thread. They finished the job with a poultice of spider's webs and healing herbs and tight bandaging. Now it was up to the wizard to live or die. "What do you make of this, Kerr?" Dartin asked, studying the broken arrow. Kerr said, thinking. "Black shaft, Obsidian tip. It's red orchid. I'm sure of it. I wonder, Carmen said, what business our mystery man had with the orcs. Unless he recovers, Leander said, we may never know. How's he doing? One Eye asked, sticking his head into the doorway. He'll live, Kirk concluded. I've seen plenty of men with worse wounds make it in the Knoll Hills. It's up to him now, D'Artagnan said. We've done all that we can. I'll stay and watch over him, Natasha said. All right, One Eye said. I'll clean up downstairs for you. Carmen, come down to the bar and I'll give you a flagon of the strongest in case he wakes up. With that, the group slowly filtered out of the room and moved into their own. Perhaps tomorrow they would find out just who the mysterious man was. One-Eyed Jacks. Thanks for refilling my glass, Eric, I said before pausing to take a drink. Was Vlad involved in the Knoll Wars too, Polly asked. No, Vlad was still at the academy. We never even knew that Vlad existed in those days, but what Vlad discovered in his last few years at school changed the world forever. Now you do have to tell us, Sonia said, and so I did. The monolith. Vlad's academy days were filled with countless hours of diligent study and ruthless training, but at other times he and Derek were given liberties to use as they wished. They would often use that time for personal study, but at other times they would leave the school grounds in search of unknown adventures. Their journeys brought them deep into the heart of the wilderness, over jagged mountains and far beneath the surface of the world. There they discovered secrets long since forgotten in the dark caverns and haunted passageways of under-earth. Little is known about the dangers that they faced during that period, but one thing is certain. That which they found buried near the heart of the world would affect the cosmos forever after. Their greatest journey of all passed through many leagues of dismal subterranean corridors, and time had no meaning for them. For who can know the time in a sunless world, and what concern is time to the young at heart? They had traveled far into the earth, so far, in fact, that Derek felt that they had traveled through the center of the world and approached the other side. It was there that their road ended, for before them rose a titanic vaulted cavern. It was a cave to rival any other, and at its center hung a towering monolith. Black it was, darker even than the lightless caves that surrounded it. It was so large that it could have been a mountain unto itself. Its shape was that of two pyramids resting bottom to bottom upon one another. Its topmost peak pointed to the stars, the bottommost to the center of the world. Hanging at the cave's center like a demon's lonely heart, great gouts of steam issued forth from its bowels. 1,000 spidery legs, branching out from its sides and piercing the surrounding walls of the cave, supported its massive bulk. Derek wondered if they had somehow found the heart of Tempest, as dark and forbidding as the soul of their ancient goddess. Ordinary men would have turned and fled at such a frightening sight, but Vlad and his lifelong friend possessed hearts of a heroic nature. Courage was their blood and curiosity their spirit, and so they approached the hulking structure with innocent caution, and in time they discovered a doorway through its adamant skin. Perhaps they had just entered the mouth of some insane beast, or stumbled into the home of a forgotten deity. But despite their fears, they went on, driving forward as only the young and adventurous are likely to do, and the things that they discovered were far beyond their greatest imaginings. It was a place of long-forgotten magic. They found machines that defied their understanding, and saw the remains of creatures that made even Vlad's heart skip a beat. Most wondrous of all was the living vessel itself, for Vlad could hear its psychic call, but Derek heard nothing. To him, the monolith possessed the silence of the dead, and while Vlad concentrated, Derek studied the foreign devices that he found there. In time, he learned the functions of them all, for he was gifted in all mechanical things. Vlad spoke to the ship for many hours, and his mind grew as he experienced the alien awareness of the ship. The monolith was a star vessel, and its ancient pilots had called themselves the Duaredheim. The machine was self-aware, and its name was Stella Navis Imperium, and with it men could travel to the stars. The ship revealed its many secrets to him, for Vlad's powers of the mind had fooled it, and it believed that its creators had returned to again pilot it to distant galaxies. Through the ship's eyes, he saw the dawn of the world and the birth of the gods. He witnessed their ancient struggles and the birth of his people. He witnessed an ancient galactic struggle between they that called themselves the Duaredheim and a race that called themselves the Ancient Ones. The Duaredheim were creatures of law and order, and the Ancient Ones were warriors of chaos. He saw the creation of the Duaredheim's pinnacle achievement and their greatest sacrifice. It was a mighty weapon, a galactic force created to imprison the Ancient Ones in another dimension, and its laws formed the barriers of the universe. A cosmic struggle ensued between these ancient gods, and during it, the Duaredheim's star vessel was crippled and could travel no farther. And so it happened to careen desperately into the planet Tempest, and a great darkness enshrouded the world. But some of the ship's masters survived, and they strove to divide their weapon into its component parts and hide them, scattering them to the four corners of the world. Then they appointed mighty guardians to defend them, for if its pieces were ever again assembled, it could be used to release the Ancient Ones, and the times of chaos would return. Just in case one of their race might foresee a need to wield the staff's powers again, they created a scepter to locate it and skillfully hid that as well. Over time, the scepter was lost, and then found again ages later by the Arcanus Magus, a secret witch coven of the human world. The Duaredheim staff consisted of four major parts: a gem, circlet, staff, and rod. The gem contained the might of 1,000 Duaredheim souls, and it slept beneath the iron talons of Modrul, Lord of the Dragons. The circlet divided the heavens, and its protector was the Lord of Ice upon the moon. The staff divided the elements, and its guardian was the Lord of Shadow and his land far below. The rod bound the four into one, and its wardens were the dark elves in their secret halls of stone. United, it was the most powerful object in the universe, and even the gods were bound by its laws. But the masters of Imperium were sorely taxed by their great struggle and their fall from the heavens. And when they saw that their work was done, they lay down and slept, and it is uncertain whether they will ever again awaken. Just to pause for a moment. Some of this description of the Duaredheim staff changed slightly as my other books were written, because I wrote this series over a period of 30 years. So there will be some slight inconsistencies in the book, but I left it, this book, the way it was in its original form as much as possible. I thought that was best. Okay, the Ancient Ones were trapped, but ever striving for release. Law held sway, but chaos had not been extinguished. If Vlad could reunite the staff, House Lucheron would become the greatest house indeed. He considered that such a weapon might not be intended for mortal hands, but he was the bravest and most daring of men. It was then that he began to envision his greater destiny. Imperium showed Vlad all its wonders, and he saw the cosmos through the eyes of a god. He learned many secrets that were never meant for mortal minds to know, and he could never again be the same. When Imperium had showed him all its secrets, Vlad soothed him and told him that he would one day return and travel with him to the stars. And then Imperium's spirit was at ease and he slept. Vlad told Derek of what he had learned, and together they traveled through the arteries of Imperium. Vlad had glimpsed his destiny, and Derek had long since determined his own. The Wizard's Quest. The next morning the stranger awoke. Weakened from dehydration and loss of blood, he heartily emptied the flagon of ale resting upon his bedstand and 2 more glasses of cool water from the pitcher that he found there. His dark beard was unkempt, and his hair was even more so, but the shining glimmer of life and his strong will to live were evident in his eyes. Looking about the small room, he found that he was not alone. A maid offered him food, and only his ravenous hunger allowed him to withstand the pain of his wound and sit up. Although it was only Willet's cereal, he ate hungrily. With a nod of thanks, he laid back and soon fell asleep. He didn't waken again until long into the evening. He might have slept longer if the tavern's evening revelry, hadn't awakened him. The woman who'd been watching over him was gone, and his bloody clothing had been cleaned and left folded by his bedside. He knew that he should remain in bed, but his business was urgent. Indeed, the span of days could undo many things, and he couldn't let that happen. Rising from his bed required the greatest effort, and he nearly passed out while dressing himself. His bandaging seemed to have been expertly done, and he felt no additional bleeding following his exertions. There was no escaping the pain, however. The wound hurt in a most debilitating fashion. No matter. When his mission was done, he could rest well enough. For surely what was a great effort for a normal man was of little consequence to an initiate of the blue cloth. Gathering his strength, he rose from bed and left his room. He descended the tavern stairs with deliberate slowness and prayed that the people he sought would still be there. Below the tavern's many rooms for rent was the mead hall proper. The steady aroma of stale drink, along with the smoke of many long, slender pipes, filled the air. A woman of exquisite beauty danced upon the room's center table, which served as a would-be stage. By day she was merely a tavern maid, but by night she seemed to transform. She would dance for hours to the smooth rhythm of Eldred Longhand's magical harp. Silver coins piled at her feet attested to the great skills that she possessed. Or was it the wonderful music? None who came to the tavern would ever know for sure. Most never even cared to guess. On this particular night, a party of 5 sat around a square table flanking the right of the stage. Many other patrons milled about the surrounding tables. Most of them were simple farmers who'd come to the inn for rest and entertainment before another day's toil. But the 5 friends who sat together were clearly not farmers, yet it could not be said that they did not belong. They all wore the same simple styles of dress that were common to the country, and only one of them carried a visible weapon. That gentleman was a sturdy-looking dwarf with a battered axe of war. Across from him sat a beautiful yet unadorned woman whose forearms' muscles were well defined as if from hard labor. Beside her sat a gnome puffing on a curved briarwood pipe, which seemed as long as he was tall. Across from the gnome sat 2 men whose faces he knew well. Beneath their long hair, slightly pointed ears were visible, revealing the Lyleselfar blood within them. They seemed entirely caught up in the rousing music, transfixed by Sonia's intoxicating dance. Few things could have torn their gaze away from her, but long years of harsh living had trained their awareness to a razor's edge. They were the first to notice the wounded man descending the back stair into the mead hall. Soon after, each of their friends followed their gaze to the foot of the stairs. The stranger was approaching their table with barely disguised effort. After a moment of hushed silence, the 5 veterans of Lord Cherrick's 3rd Mountain Brigade focused through the fog created by One Eye's specially brewed ale, for here, walking toward them, was the same wounded traveler that they'd rescued the night before. He was clutching his injured side with his right hand as if to hold back the pain. As he walked toward them, his eyes remained locked upon them. The fire of conviction burned so fiercely within his eyes that none among them could have doubted his determination. With an air of pride and power, the young sage approached their table. Strangely, none within the bar save old One Eye himself seemed to notice the entrance of their unusual guest. Sonia danced. She was as caught up in Eldred's music as those who watched her. "May I sit down?" the stranger asked, pointing to an empty bar stool beside Carmen. "Of course," she replied, pulling the chair out for him. "I must thank you all for saving my life." "We'd have done the same for any soldier," Kerr said. "Nonsense, but I think I may have a way of repaying you." "We've been wondering," Kalor said, "what business a mage has in Waysboro. Few come here save farmers and king's soldiers." You are Kalos Starseeker, student of Uldrich Swifthands, soldier of Highcrest Garrison, and thief of untold skill, are you not? Well, that all depends. He was quite taken aback at this stranger's personal knowledge of him. Was he to be arrested for something? It had been years since he'd stolen anything of real value. Don't let him fool you, Kerr said. It doesn't take a wizard to find out about us. You know how Natasha likes to talk. And you are Kerr Kegporter, son of Moldrin, mushroom farmer, winemaker, and decorated corporal of the Royal Army. You are he who slew 12 jackals single-handedly after discovering a small mining expedition under attack while you were scouting alone, deep within the Dark Dragon. Well, it was more like 7 or 8, actually, Kerr replied. His ego was more than boosted by this heroic rendition of him. You two half-elves have journeyed here from afar. You have both been sailors, healers, and warriors too. Leander, if you follow the pathways that you were taught in your youth, you will find your greatest strength in the powers of nature. And you, Dartin, hold the secrets of Odin's runes, which your father taught to you. Indeed, you may be the last priest of Odin, although you have yet to set out on that path. How is it that you know so much about us, wizard? Dartin said, his frustration growing. I've had just about enough of this mystery. Patience, the wizard replied, coughing and nearly doubling over from the pain that it brought him. You need to get back to bed, Carmen said. You're going to open your wounds up again. Patience, my friends. All will be revealed in good time, I assure you. If I may continue, last but not the least among your party is Carmen Elise Anastasia, champion of Greenbury Abbey, leader of men, and a devout follower of Ilmatar, and her son Vanamoinen, hero of the gods. What are you about, wizard? Kerr asked, coming up from his flagon of ale for a bit of air. Forgive me, I am Elman von Mathers, mage of the blue cloth, and student of Arundweel the White. I come bearing a business proposition from the king, Lord Ivan Goliath Cherrick himself. You have all been selected for your specific skills and talents. How is it that you know so much of us? Leander said. Few know us save those who served with us in the Knoll Hills. Let's just say that I have my sources. For the moment, there are more important matters to discuss, and I grow weaker every moment. Maybe we should hear him out, Kalor said. The situation in the north worsens daily. The Red Orcan tribes are massing all along our northern borderlands like they haven't done in hundreds of years. We've received many rumors of raids on distant outposts, and no communication has been had from them in some time. We've had similar reports from the west as well. There is evidence of Dragonian involvement, and they seem to be stirring up the tribes. Dragonians, the dirty stone lickers. Why, I can't wait to sink my axe into... Not now, Keg, Leander scolded, prompting Von Mathers to reveal more of his tale. They're up to something, and they seem to have sufficient numbers for a serious invasion. Thus far, they've only raided the smaller outlying villages and outposts. They often mutilate their victims, spreading out the pieces so that the true numbers of the dead cannot easily be known. Thus far, there have been no survivors, although many of the victims may have been taken away as slaves. So you want us to do some cutting for you? Kerr said, scowling with mild drunkenness. How do we know that you're not some renegade warlock out for his own gain? I wear a ring with the king's own seal, and Carmen should be able to feel the good within my soul. Looking him over intently, she nodded an affirmative to the irritable dwarf. Her god means nothing to me, wizard, Kerr said, but I'll hear you out for Carmen's sake. Elwyn explained, as you are all accustomed to action, I will make my proposition. The king has ordered me to find a small and able party of adventurers to travel north to Nordtown Village and investigate these rumors of Red Orcan war parties. Your mission will be to estimate their strength, and if possible, discover the purpose of their tactics. When you complete your scouting mission, each of you will be paid 200 pieces of gold, with a retainer of 50 gold for each of you who choose to depart. If you accept this perilous mission, travel to Blarney Stables, located at the south end of Merchant's Way in Thievestown. There you will find the mighty dwarven blacksmith named Grog Anvilhead. Tell him that you are bound for Nordtown upon the Anvil of Fire. This will identify you as loyal agents of the crown. Anvilhead will issue you your retainer and outfit you with supplies and fresh mounts for your journey. Return to Grog's smithy when your quest is complete, and he will contact me. With that, the wizard tossed a hefty pouch to Kalor and rose stiffly with a small outcry of pain. But now I must be off. I can dally no longer. Fare thee well, and may the gods guide you to the right decision. Turning to face the front doors of the hall, their strange messenger walked through the smoke-filled tavern and out into the night. A few moments later, the clatter of hooves echoed loudly in the street, the sound penetrating into their minds with the promise of new adventure. So much gold for a simple scouting mission? Such a job would have earned them no special favors in the royal army. Several long silent moments passed between them all. With the chaotic thoughts brought on by such a mysterious and outrageous offer, they couldn't help but question the wizard's words. Sonia's hypnotic dance continued. Her audience was still bound by Eldred's enthralling music. The smoke of many pipes curled about her perfect form, the light shining from table lamps flickering in her dark, starlit eyes. Eldred's music couldn't seem to penetrate the silence at their table, a silence that was begging to be broken. Kalor was the first to speak, a habit that he would come to regret on future occasions. Looking inside of the leather pouch that the wizard had thrown him, he found 20 coins, and all of them were made of platinum. Platinum! Only once in his entire career of thieving had he come across one, yet here before him were 20. 20 platinum, he said as quietly as he could. By all of the gods, we could take this money and ride away to the south, away from all this war. But Carmen quickly silenced him. Her sense of duty in the fight against evil was always the most important to her. Enough, Kalor. The fate of all our homes and families is at stake here. We did our part in the army, that's true, but we always knew that we could do so much more on our own. As a team, we've never been beaten. Let's take a vote. If we all agree to accept this quest, then we ride at first light. Looking about the table, she met the gaze of each of them in an intimate and personal fashion. She'd know if any of them gave an answer that their hearts weren't into. Leander, she began, how vote ye? As always, I journey with you. Dartin, how vote ye? My vote goes with Leander. So long as it's a good fight, Odin will be with me. And your vote, Axe-wielder? She asked, knowing the vulnerable nature of his warrior's ego. Enough of this, Axe-wielder dung. You're always trying to soften to my ego. I think this wizard's quest is a fool's journey. We are but 5 against so many, but I've never claimed to be as smart as I am brave, so I'm in, as long as there's orcs to slay. With Kerr's vote, only Kalor's remained. Young and unafraid, he was fascinated with the pursuit of knowledge. His magical skills were ever improving, though he could now only perform the simplest of cantrips and invocations. This journey would delay his studies, but like any gnome, the promise of gold was a powerful motivator. The clank of Von Mather's money pouch upon the table confirmed his vote to go on. With that final vote, they once again found themselves in service to the king. Knowing that the following day's journey would be a long one, they returned to their tavern rooms to pack their belongings for the trip to Thieves' Town. With Eldred Longhand's magical harp playing long into the night, none of them were aware of an indistinct figure sitting in the shadows amid the tavern goers of One-Eyed Jacks. So the next episode, we'll begin in the tavern once again and continue with the story on page 100. Thank you for listening and have a great night. Until tomorrow. Remember, read Curse Rage, Part 1 of the Duaredheim Staff Saga by Eric D.J. O'Brien. Thank you and good night.